Hi, my name is Philip, and this presentation is called Reformulating the Responsibilities of the Actors in the Classroom, a Cybernetic Perspective. The reason I've used the word actors is based on a book called How to Do Things with Words, written by Austin. And he said that once we realize that what we have to study is not the sentence, but the issuing of an utterance in a speech situation, there can hardly be any longer a possibility of not seeing that stating is actually performing an act. And that is why I've used the word actors. And then there is another word here called cybernetic. Now, I'm not going to get into too much detail about cybernetic, and we can enter this discussion a little bit later. Let's move right into this presentation. The premise of this presentation rests on a man called Heinz von Foerster, who said it's the listener, not the speaker, who determines the meaning of an utterance. And this is Heinz von Foerster when somebody says that they've determined the origin of the universe. He says, yes, you've invented to explain the origin. And this is him when he was younger. So if it's the listener, not the speaker, who determines the meaning of an utterance, what does this mean? People make their own meaning based on their own thinking. I cannot make you see the world the way I do. I believe we all see things differently, as George Kelly, his personal construct theory, has proposed. And I can demonstrate this. Now, having just presented this in the United States, I used the example of what comes to mind when I say Donald Trump. And obviously everybody laughed. In South Africa, when I do this presentation, I say what comes to mind when I say load shedding. So every person who is in the audience then has their own personal experience of that term, whether it's load shedding or Donald Trump or terrorist activities that happen in France and recently in Turkey. We all see experiences in an individual, personalized way, and I can demonstrate this. What do you see in this picture? Somebody helping someone with their hair. How many of you thought that you would see two teenage or college students, one holding the other one's hair so she doesn't vomit on it? A smiling face, leaving a concentration camp. Tires of some sort. How many people thought they would see the world's strongest man, Zydrunas Savicus, in this presentation? Paradise. I'm really looking forward to that place. Or am I? Destruction. We complete these pictures all in a different manner depending on our past lived experience. And Glassersfeld provides 4 points of how the listener may determine what meaning to attach to communication. And when I say listener, it's also the viewer. Namely, sounds must be recognized as sound images of words that suggest correlations. These correlations are representations of components of earlier experience. Our past experiences form the basis of the remembered components for possible meanings of the utterance. The choice of meanings that the listener attaches to the utterance is dependent on the context, including the listener's familiarity with the actor. So where does this all take place? In conversations. It's the verbal, the visual, the analog stuff. And here I have some pictures, and if you haven't met my wife, this is what she looks like. The analog stuff is what is often stepped over in conversations. That is a very important part of conversation. And the problem is that objectivity is troubling. We don't all have universal starting points. We don't all come from the same families. We weren't all born on the same day to the same parents. And even if we were, we would still experience life differently. For each family member has a different view of their family and their world. So it is an oversight to assume that a group of people sitting in a class will all understand the teacher's expression and integrate this information into their personal worldview. And this is particularly true for our context with our 11 official languages and diverse ethnic and cultural groups. And we have colonial legacies which are impacting the trust relationships in the classroom as well. So how each individual observes and makes sense of these observations differs considerably. Radical differences in meaning construction are taking place in the classroom, irrespective of what the teacher assumes is taking place. Each one of these young people are understanding and thinking about the course content in a different way. Content and context. The map is not the territory, as Alfred Korzybski and then later Bateson reminded us. Knowing of some content without knowing the context creates problems. And I've used this example. Here I have a traffic light in the middle of a desert. What is the purpose of a traffic light in the middle of the desert? In order to define a traffic light, we need to talk about roads, motor vehicles, pedestrians. So it's the context that helps provide the definition for the traffic light. And that is why it's important to look at purpose, processes, and goals. Imagine explaining the term aeroplane to a group of people who have never had any technological experience. The context is thus very important. And here I have Mark Zuckerberg going for his run. Don't know if you've seen these pictures going around the internet. Here he is working on some electrical installation in China. And here he is again. And the point of these pictures is that one has to be the context. One cannot talk about things without having a personal relation to it, without it being meaningful. And for the students in the class to find your lessons believable, it will help if there is more authenticity in your content. And that is why I say be the context. And Bateson reminds us that thoughts can be about pigs or coconuts, but there are no pigs or coconuts in the brain. This picture is of a circuit board, an old one. Now, there are many people who will watch this presentation and will just see stuff. It's just stuff, green stuff, orange stuff, whereas somebody who's had a background in engineering or electronics will actually see things here. They will see there are transistors, there are capacitors and resistors. They may even notice there are fuses missing here. This is a language they can understand. Another picture, I've got the internal combustion engine. And for those people who are enthusiasts, motor vehicle enthusiasts, will realize that this is a V6. And this engine is meaningful to many people. Maybe some who drove an old E-Class, Mercedes. I cannot teach you. From a cybernetic approach, it's the listener who determines the meaning of an utterance. And it's the listener's past lived experience which is a major contributor to this meaning. Thus, the listener's context is of interest in a lesson and should be incorporated into the learning system. The term teacher and learner, or teach and learn, for me are actually connected. Teach means there's learning, and learn means there's teaching. Therefore, teacher and learner are related to each other, and each is an attribute within a system. And I've used the term attribute based on Alan Turing's work. He came up with the Turing Test, and Alan Turing introduced a test based on his questions of whether machines can think. This test set up to determine whether a human can judge whether they are interfacing with another human or a machine in a texted conversation. The person who makes this conclusion of intelligent interaction has no knowledge of whether they are interfacing with a human or a machine. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to determine if a human will think a machine is intelligent. And they think a machine is intelligent if they say, I feel like my experience of this interaction is intelligent, as though I'm talking to another human being. Because, So the beauty of this test is that it moves away from tests based on definitions of what would be considered intelligent behavior to a test where one determines whether they are communicating in an intelligent conversation based on the experience of the tester in the conversation. So here's a simplified explanation. We've got a person, and he is asked to interface with this machine, this computer. It's a texted conversation. Now, he does not know if on the other side of this computer is a human or a computer program. If he feels that it is intelligent and he can have a proper conversation, then he will say this is an intelligent interaction, and therefore he'll deem it to be intelligent, and that's obviously the nature of a human. But if he says, no, I did not determine this is intelligent, therefore it failed the Turing test. So somebody will write an algorithm or make a machine that is, they want to pass the Turing test, that a group of people have to take this test and then say, right, we feel that this machine is intelligent. The tester judges intelligence based on whether they experience the interaction as intelligent. Turing does not assume intelligence to be a property of the machine. Rather, in the way the test is set up, intelligence is attributed to the machine or box by the tester. It's something the tester attributes to the interaction. And the same applies for teachers. For a teacher to think of themselves as a teacher, they need to allow their students to attribute this to them by way of acknowledging that learning is taking place. I cannot own that term. The outcomes. It is not what the teacher thinks, it's what the learners see or thinks. They are the observers of your information or your interaction. We work with each learner's perceptions and how they come to understand these observations, all while owning our own epistemologies. Therefore, I cannot teach you, as I said, I cannot create meaning in another individual. Rather, the responsibility of meaning generation is in the hands of the person who hears or sees the message. I cannot force you to learn. And I know this firsthand, as I also have a teenage son who's 17, and to get him to study is another story. Therefore, until he determines that he wants to study, there's not much I can actually do. I can try and influence the environment to make it suitable for him to study by manipulating things, which can be useful, but it's still up to him to make that decision to study. And I said that the person hears or sees the message, and this is another problem. As I said, well, I don't know if I said, but I have a child who actually has a hearing disability, and in a class, we cannot just assume that everybody cognitively operates in the same way. On a neurological level, different people have different challenges. In this example, we have somebody who's sleeping. So, and look at this yawning face at the back. We can't just assume that people are actually hearing the message or even seeing it. And there is such a thing called pseudo-attention. Maybe this person over here is looking and it seems like they are listening, but they're actually not. The curriculum needs to reflect the learners. When I am personally connected to something, it is more interesting. There's no sleeping when it's personal. When there are role players in the class who have added to the curriculum and now we're discussing that person's topic, how could they sleep or be disinterested in something that they have chosen? There's no sleeping when it's personal. When you hear your name, you're aware. The curriculum is a teaching strategy. Educators frequently fall into the trap of designing curriculums as a form of control over the learning process. Different learners have different learning styles and strategies. We can't assume that all learners must learn in the same method. Designing a curriculum is entering a conversation with the learners. Therefore, I've realized I need to design a curriculum that creates an inviting conversation. If the receivers of this curriculum are not reflected within the curriculum, it's simply unjust. Getting the message experienced in a meaningful manner, we can use contextual teaching, using the contextual information of all the actors in the class, of which I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how I do that, but I will mention the teach back, which is a method in which after the teacher has presented to the learners the topics of the learning outcomes, the learner is invited to teach back his or her understandings of this material to the teacher. And the teach back is based on the works of Vygotsky, Luria, and Landa, as well as information processing theories of broadband and so forth. The teach back is very useful because the teacher can also take the role of the student, and the student can take the role of the teacher. In closing, responsibilities. Remember that this presentation was called Reformulating the Responsibilities of the Actors in the Classroom. And I'm saying through conversations, contextual inquiries can be made. Can I change my thinking from I teach you to I am a teacher only if learning is taking place? And this is the Turing Test both ways, because the student can also apply the Turing Test to me. Cooperation does not mean the students doing what the teacher wants. Rather, the students taking part in the class and being part of, rather than receivers of. The teacher thus needs to work with the goals of the learners as well as his or her own goals. Too often, educators create curriculums assuming what the goals of the learners should be, instead of actually determining what the goals of the learners are and then going back and redesigning the curriculum. An atmosphere needs to be created of conversation and mutual co-creation. The outcomes: cooperation only, no coercion. Agreed responsibilities. Work with the students' goals. Heterarchy over hierarchy. Context. We live in Africa and the country is South Africa. How much local content is in your curriculum? Learner contextualized content. We don't need to import all the knowledge. Rather, local, proudly South African knowledge is sufficient. And I'm not saying to exclude the international community and what has been done. I'm saying we have very unique situations and contexts in South Africa which can be incorporated in an innovative way, of which the rest of the world may not have, and we can contribute something based on this context. Learning begins with each student's aims or outcomes. Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, teaches humanity that people can achieve goals in spite of horrific circumstances. Find the student's reasons for being in the class and work with it. The road becomes much less rocky. It's all about taking responsibility. And I welcome any questions. Thanks for listening.